Mrs. Yarrodabersi.
Ave Satanas! Hail Satan! Hail Satan!
Greetings, heathens. Welcome to Hail Satan. This is the podcast exploring Satanism, culture, and life in general through the eyes of modern Satanists. My name is Joseph Rose, and I'm going to be your host for today. I'm lucky enough to be part of an awesome, active, independent congregation called Satanic Delco, and I'm also a member of the Satanic Temple. And that reminds me, I get lots of people asking if Satanic Delco accepts members from outside of our local region. And yes, we sure do. We have members from all over the world in our group, and it's pretty fucking great. Today, I will present you with the second half of my conversation with Reverend Raul Antony from the Church of Satan. I realized that I didn't mention this in the last episode, but the way this came about was really simple. I literally just sent an email through the Church of Satan website. I sent an email asking if someone from Church of Satan would want to come on and talk about all of this stuff. I got a response, and off we went. Pretty simple. First things first, let me just give a quick shout out to some lovely patrons that have joined the club over here. We've got Corey, Amy, Benjamin, JMT, Sarah, Megan, Eileen, Darren, Felix, Lucy, Eric, Kathleen, and Pierce. Pierce is a pretty great fucking name. As usual, I am extremely grateful to have the support from all of you awesome people out there. Thank you very much. I look forward to getting to know you guys a little bit better. I will forgo the listener mail and get right into the interview, but first let me remind you to visit the website at hailsatanpodcast.com. You can find links there to join us on social media, a form to send me an email, which you know I love, and of course you can join our Patreon on there. There's various tiers to look at. And of course, the cool Greetings from Hell is officially underway. I got our first postcards, the postcards for June. Greetings from Hell is our satanic postcard of the month club for some of the tiers on the Patreon over there. I was extremely pleased with the quality of these postcards. They were just what I wanted them to be, and the packages are all put together. They're going to be shipping out very soon, so I can't wait for you guys to get your hands on those and let me know what you think. All right, so let's get back into my chat with Reverend Raul Antony. Maybe we can touch on some of the Might is Right stuff and the plagiarism accusations. We know that he borrowed heavily from those other texts. That's one way we could put it. And he didn't exactly cite those sources. Do you have a feeling about any of that?
Sure. Yeah, I have feelings about Might is Right. I helped with the publishing of the authoritative edition of Might is Right with the foreword by Peter H. Gilmore. The Anton LaVey was never shy about Might is Right. He actually, in the upcoming book published by Blanche Barton, We Are Satanists, we actually are including what she is including. I believe it's a sheet from an early 1966 Church of Satan ritual, and in it, LaVey is reading out of Might is Right, and he's referencing Might is Right. And she makes it very clear, like, this is a satanic text. And LaVey included a dedication to Ragnar Redbeard in the original editions of the Satanic Bible, including Ayn Rand as well, and several others. At some point, the publisher removed those dedications, and LaVey sent out a notice to members, explaining, okay, this is a decision that the publisher made. He didn't feel one way or the other for it, because I think he did see a lot of people get worked up about it, because it's every philosophy has some kind of basis on previous philosophies, kind of feeds off of it, right? And you have even Nietzsche is kind of said to have been based off of, say, Stirner, or other philosophers going back to antiquity always kind of based their philosophy off of others. So it's nothing new under the sun in terms of being influenced by other people. Now, I will not go the route of certain people who will dismiss Midas Right, and they say, oh, he just took a few bits of it, and the rest of Midas Right is pretty much garbage. Like, no, that's not true at all either. He was not going to plagiarize a whole dang book, and there's parts of the book which are not congruent with Satanism, and actually there are big parts of the book that are contradictory within itself. That's actually a part of the introduction of the authoritative edition of Midas Right that is published by our members, and I consider it to be the best edition of the book, and actually, because it's actually the most accurate version of the book. Something that people don't know is that the book was published by different people and was actually edited multiple times over the course of its history. Large parts of it were cut out, manipulated. So LaVey actually is not, he's not the only person to have done this. Many people have taken bits and pieces of that book and even republished it, right? The book has parts in it that contradict itself. We say that the main core principle of Midas Right is individual action. That is, at the end of the day, the most important. That is the core message of the book. That everything comes down to an individual action and execution on individual will. Now, yes, Ragnar Redbeard had his prejudices. Many people at the time did, and that came into play in his book. And there are parts of that those parts of the book are addressed in our introduction to that authoritative edition. We point out that it's not just contradictory to Satanism, but it's contradictory to itself, to its core message. So it's not a perfect book. It's not a Bible. It's not a holy text, right? But at the same time, Satanists, we're taking upon ourselves the most diabolical icon, a symbol that's been associated with all kinds of evil, terrible things throughout history. We're still able to expunge the things that we feel are contradictory to the core idea of what Satanism is, what the word Satan means, right? So we're able to take something that is completely repugnant and still come from that something productive, something life-affirming, something powerful for us. So we take the same approach with books like Midas Right. Yes, there are parts of that which people might find repugnant, but we can still garner a lot of power, inspiration from texts such as that. So I make no, you might say I may qualify a bit, but I still think Midas Right is a satanic text. The core message of the book is satanic. There are elements of it that don't live up to modern standards, don't live up to its own standards. And I think LaVey recognized that, and he took parts of it that were teaching a satanic message, and he included that in the Satanic Bible. And he actually referenced that book to other members. He called his copy the Yellow Book, the Yellow One. He was not shy about it. There were members of the Church of Satan who put out music and literature influenced by Midas Right, throughout the 80s and 90s, well before, it was quote unquote outed that he copied from that book. No, people knew, and of course now in the day of the internet, it's people take that for granted, how much information is out there and how people have that information can quickly spread, and they think, okay, well, if people knew, then everyone should have known at the time. It's like, well, it was something that he let people discover on their own. And he, like I said, he included the dedication to Ragnar Redbeard. It did not take a lot of effort to say to Ragnar Redbeard, whose might is right, who knew might is right. And it's like, okay, piece that together. Look at the time, and then you find the book, and then you say, oh yeah, okay, he was influenced by that. Or Ayn Rand. He listed Ayn Rand in the dedication, and he was quoted as saying, my philosophy can be Ayn Rand with ritual trappings. He didn't say just ritual trappings, by the way. I have the article where that quote comes from, but he was contextualizing it in terms of the hippie collectivist movement of the 60s. This is whereas other occult and New Age movements were collectivists. Well, I'm actually giving them Ayn Rand, which is harsh individualism with ritual. And of course, there are other elements to it. There's Nietzsche. I would actually say that Nietzsche is probably the number one influence on his philosophy, actually, because from Nietzsche came Ayn Rand, came Redbeard, came Mencken, came so many of the influences that LaVey listed in his philosophy, and you could read it, that you could read into his philosophy. So
when an author uses that source text within the context of a new original work without citations, that's defined as plagiarism. Do you think that was an oversight, or did he just not feel it was important, or did he have some feeling that people would somehow just know better and would be able to find out?
I think it could be an error of solipsism on his behalf, which we can actually get into. But yeah, he might have trusted that people would kind of figure it out, piece it together, and kind of investigate on their own. Right. There's a certain kind of attitude that he was going with the Satanic Bible. He actually, in his introduction to a certain edition of Might is Right, he actually talks about that besides the text that he used, one of the other takeaways from Might is Right that he was going for was that kind of smashing you with a hammer over the head, just being just this forceful text. And maybe that was his goal with that was his goal with the Satanic Bible, and maybe there's some better ways he could have executed that for sure. And like I said, maybe he thought the dedication was enough like this kind of occult kind of key to understanding his philosophy and the sources, his influences. And he trusted that people would look that up, and he was not shy about it. Like I said, he read out of Might is Right before in 1966, prior to the publication of the Satanic Bible. He was teaching out of Might is Right. Yeah. So it's not like, okay, like this big secret. He's like, he knew this is the book that he was teaching out of. Now, maybe there is a little bit of the pragmatic, lesser magic aspect of it. And maybe it's like, maybe, some people will get turned off by the fact that this is coming from such a book. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not going to read his mind about it. It'd be something I'd be concerned with, sure. But at this time, it's not something that we shy away from. Now, I think there's also I think it's important also to take the attitude in which people come at this allegation of plagiarism. I think not everyone, but I think a lot of people who come at this kind of plagiarism idea come at it from a damning perspective. They're not just saying, oh yeah, LaVey plagiarized parts of the Satanic Bible, which a lot of religions actually include texts from previous. I mean, the Holy Bible includes the Old Testament. I think, but that's various public religious texts that are published throughout time, are actually collections of other texts. So it's not entirely. And there's also the idea I want to mention that Might is Right comes out of the school of egoism that I mentioned. And part of that philosophy is taking something and making it your own. So becoming my property. And actually, if one were to get kind of really philosophical about it, LaVey did the egoist thing. He took Might is Right, manipulated it, and made it his own. And that actually falls in line with the message of the book, which is, as an individual, set your own moral guidelines, take and create of your own. And that's what he did. So in fact, he's following in the spirit of Might is Right and of egoism. But what I was getting to earlier is that some people who come with this plagiarism issue, they come at it from a damning perspective. They're not just saying, "Oh, he plagiarized." They're saying, "He plagiarized Might is Right. He plagiarized Ayn Rand. What are you going to say about that?" And I think that's the attitude of a lot of people coming in. And for me, I'd say, yeah, okay, yeah, he did. Yeah, so okay, yeah, he took from Ayn Rand. He took from Might is Right. Deal with it. Okay, if that makes you uncomfortable, if that sets off, something in you because of those words.
Can you sort of relate to where that concern would come from? I mean, there's a lot of
not really
notions attached to some of those texts being sort of outwardly racist and things like that. And so I guess maybe the feeling is,
I don't have that knee-jerk. Maybe it's something in me, but I don't have that knee-jerk reaction. No, I say, oh, okay, let me check that out.
Right.
Okay, all right, there's some stuff here I don't really agree with. Okay, but immediately it's like, no, you're affiliated, you're influenced by this evil thing, and okay, let's see why that's evil. Let's see why that's disgusting. Okay, let me look at. Okay, yeah, there's some things in here that I don't really agree with, but there's a lot in here that's actually really powerful. Okay.
It's just sort of the ability or the willingness to separate the parts of a thing that you like or identify with and leave the parts that you don't.
Yeah, and that's such an important part of Satanism in general. Is
Sure.
like, again, you're taking the symbol of Satan. Now we take it for granted. It's 2021 right now, but in like 1966, even occultists, even New Agers were frightened of the idea of Satan.
Yeah.
This was something like, it's part of the reason why he included it was actually the reason he included the Enochian keys in the Satanic Bible, was because, these are pretty interesting. These are pretty cool. And everyone around him in the quote unquote occult community was saying, no, that's forbidden. You don't include that stuff. That's evil. That's dangerous. And immediately he was like, evil, dangerous. Okay, that's going in there. So now, there's people that say, oh, he printed an inaccurate version of the Enochian keys. He copied them from Crowley, or he copied a bad translation of Crowley or whatever. It's like, so fucking what? I'm sorry, excuse me. So what? That's not the point. It's not like he actually believed just communicating with angels in angelic language. That's not the point. It's the poetic nature of it, the aesthetic of it. And so much of that is a part of magic in whichever way you slice it, whether it's purely ritual, if it's purely psychodrama, or if you believe that there's something more to magic. That's what we're doing. We're taking symbols, audio, vibrations in the air, which is what audio and music, that's what it is.
Yeah.
We're manipulating that to achieve a certain psychological state and put yourself in a way that might be able to project that.
This stuff really speaks to the personality and the priorities that Anton had at the time when he was doing all of this. I don't think he was ever known to be much of a technical scholar of any kind. He was more about the presentation and the impact, the psychodrama, probably at the expense of things like making sure you have proper citations and proper translations. Do you get the sense that it was rushed? The story that I've heard goes that the publisher approached him to create a book, and that was coming off the back of Rosemary's Baby and an increased interest in the occult generally.
So it's an interesting question. Actually, a high priestess, Peggy Nadramia, she actually published an article on her website called "So It Was Written: The History of the Satanic Bible." And in it, it's a long piece about the whole history. That's actually two pieces. It's an addition to it. There's a second article that adds to it. All about the publication of the Satanic Bible and the back and forth he was having with the publishers, things that they asked him to edit, things that they asked him to change, his own doubts. He's self-taught. He's not an academic. That's for sure, obviously. Yep. And I think that actually is something that irks some academics. some professional researchers and things like that, they look at him and they kind of hold their nose up to that idea. It's like, oh, here's this guy, this a self-taught guy who pieced together a bunch of things and created this philosophy called Satanism. Well, I have, this or that certification, and I know more about the history of Satanism and this, and maybe you do have some more historical knowledge of certain things, but that's not the point. He was capturing a certain current that was going on at the time, and that's still going on today, and that's actually been going on throughout all history. Now, could he have worded some things better? Probably, I guess. And was he rushed? Yeah, there was some element to that. Yeah, and that's actually part of the article that our high priestess published. So it's not so much that he was rushed. Is that there was pressure. He was putting out a book that he knew was going to be a huge seller, that was going to be groundbreaking. There's a lot of pressure to do that, and he was not a writer at the time. Yeah. Or one can argue he was never really a writer. He put ideas to paper, where he spoke them to somebody else who put them down for him. And, so there was certainly pressure to put out the Satanic Bible. The Satanic Bible came after the foundation of the Church of Satan, right? So the Church of Satan was in 1966. He was getting a lot of media. So people were saying, hey, you need to put out a book, yeah, you can make some money off of it, but probably a good idea to put out a book. If you want your movement to last, you need to have your philosophy in print.
Yeah.
And I think there was a lot of pressure for him to put out a philosophy that was in line with the times. And I think he was brave enough to reject that and actually put out a philosophy that was very much out of tune with the times. And it still is to this day, I think. And I think we cherish that. I think that's an important part of Satanism, is to be slightly out of tune with the time, to be the adversary, the opposer, have that self-awareness of what's around you and the things that are driving society, the zeitgeist, and being able to tap into it or manipulate it to your advantage.
Next in my notes is a bit about Blanche Barton. Shortly after Anton passed away, she did an interview where she stated that Anton did in fact believe in the devil. And you mentioned that maybe you had some insight into this?
Yeah, actually, I talked to Blanche Barton about that yesterday. We had a nice long conversation catching up on things, but we spoke about that specific thing. And that was an interview done over 20 years ago. Her lover had just passed away, and the media asked her some questions, and she responded, and that's what they printed. Now, she doesn't remember what the context and the rest of her response was to that, but she does stand by that. And I think it does actually reflect what LaVey wrote in the Satanic Bible. Yeah, the devil, Satan, is a force of nature. It is part of nature. There is something in nature that we do not fully understand, and we tap into that. It is not an anthropomorphic deity. It is not something that it's not just devil with horns and a pitchfork in hell. That's not what Satan is, and that's not what she meant by he believes in the devil. No, he believes that there is something out there, and it could be something as simple as an equation. It could just be like gravity, just a force that exists, or it's a term, a collective term for different forces, for different aspects of human nature. To me, Satan, if someone, there was a time, I guess, where I was a strict, militant atheist and strict materialist. And that's the kind of hill that I would die on, but not so much anymore, actually. When somebody says, do you believe in Satan? I say, yes, I believe in Satan. Not the Satan that you understand. But to me, Satan is that moment, I'm in the ring and I feel that adrenaline running through my body. That's Satan to me. When I put someone in a chokehold, to me, that's Satan. When I'm having that passionate love for a person, that is Satan. When I'm in those moments where just like life is just surging through you and you have that fight or flight instinct or that love or hate instinct, that's Satan to me. And, I can't quantify that in a way. Maybe it is all just chemical. Maybe it is just adrenaline and hormones. Maybe, sure. But throughout history, all of that has been relegated to the devil. These are feelings of lust, of hate, of violence, of fear. And, all that is of the devil. You must let go of all that. You must let go of the flesh, and you must become one with God or one with Zen or one with this or that. And you must, disassociate with your ego. And that's actually the message of, it's actually called in the book called The Message of Buddha, written by, what's his name? Anatoly, the guy who wrote The Revolt of the Angels. He actually wrote a book. Anatole France. He actually wrote a book called The Message of Buddha. And he says that if he was to call himself anything, he'd call himself a Buddhist, and that he believed in and that was actually the message of Revolt of the Angels. Was if you read the whole book and you read to the very end, you'll see that Satan defeated God, yes, but he had to defeat himself. He had to let go of his ego and dissolve himself in order to be truly one with, I don't know, with the nature or the world or whatever. And so we were complete. That's why that book was LaVey familiar with the book? I don't know, maybe, but that's, I think, why he would completely reject that book, reject that message. We would completely reject that. Instead of dissolving the ego, we embrace the ego and we use it for whatever it is that we do in the world. We channel it in a productive way. There is a way that can become completely destructive, but that's the thing that you guys got into too, right? Destroying your enemies. But be pragmatic about it. Don't be stupid, right? There are many ways you can destroy a person. There are many ways that you can channel hate in a productive manner. Whether it's physical, it comes down to it. Sometimes it can be a physical destruction, and everything comes down to violence. And my philosophy and my worldview, everything comes down to violence at some level. When you call the police on somebody, you're calling upon violence. When you're voting, you're calling upon, this is how I want violence to be applied. That's the very act of voting. The very act of any kind of social order is maintained by violence. So how can you leverage that to your advantage? That's a way of destroying somebody.
It's interesting to me that so much of the conversation surrounding all of this stuff comes down to the language that's used, the way we understand and define words. We've focused on it a good bit here today. And you mentioned all these different feelings and ideas that you attribute to Satan. I feel like that type of thing is really common in religious contexts, particularly with Christians. When you talk with a Christian and ask critical questions, when there's a lack of a concrete answer, if you ask why enough times, inevitably, the answer is going to be, well, God works in mysterious ways, which is just another way of saying, I don't know. So it's just blamed on God or credited to God, as it were. But I think somewhere in there is a real answer. But when we don't know the answer, or we don't have a great way of finding it yet, the answer just defaults to God. And in this case, you're saying, well, that's Satan.
Yeah, I guess I can see that. But at the same time, it's like we don't say, well, that's Satan and that's an excuse, or, well, this is in Satan's hands now, or something like that. No, we take control of that, and we take responsibility for our actions. And that's a big part of magic in general too, is yes, perform the ritual, but then now go out and execute, go out and do, apply the philosophy. Don't just pray on it, right? And there is absolutely a part of Satanism that says we don't know everything in the world. There is a part of the human experience that we don't have answers for. I have a cell phone. I don't know exactly how it works, but I know it works. And I know there's engineers out there who know how it works, and they designed it and built it, and a whole team of them, and they're great people. But, there's also going to be some technology 30 years from now, that those same engineers have no idea how that's going to be created, have no idea how that's going to be created in any way.
Yeah, so, I mean, we still don't have a great explanation for how gravity works.
Exactly.
But
we have a model.
Accept it.
We have a model that works. I think science is that. It's a model. It's a great model. But I don't, it's going to upset some people, but I don't leave it at that. I think there's a flag that we can plant right outside of our understanding of the world and reach for it.
Yeah. I reached out to my group to see if anyone had some questions for you, and we have just a couple. When a new member joins the Church of Satan, it costs $225. What do they actually get for that? Or is it just considered a donation or a sign of appreciation for the philosophy?
No, you get a membership card. You get some documentation of your membership. You get, but yeah, that mainly is a show of support for the organization. Right? This is a one-time fee. Anybody who says, "Oh, this is just a money-making racket," knows nothing about business. That's the worst way to make money. You don't make money on a one-time, lifetime membership to anything. That's the worst business. Yeah. So realistically, that doesn't make sense. But it's also a barrier to entry. We've heard the term gatekeeper, and yeah, sure, we're gatekeepers. All right. And the amount of money it takes to join a Church of Satan is not an insignificant amount. It should be something that people really consider, because we don't want just people to send out join a mailing list and then become part of the Church of Satan. We don't want that. Right. We don't want just people just flocking and just padding our numbers out like that. No, we want somebody to say, "Whoa, $200+? Huh? Let me read into this." So it's an amount that's not impossible. If you're a productive person, you can work that out. But it's an amount of money that certainly makes you hesitate, and certainly makes you like, do I really want to do this? Is this really worth my time? Is this really, do I really want to join something? I don't know. So that's the kind of person we want to, that we're interested in coming to the organization, somebody who has hesitated, and we want to give you hesitation, right? And we're not just coming at you with open arms. We're not doing that. And if that's the thing you're looking for, you can go somewhere else.
Yeah, I've heard that criticism. It's pretty common, but I actually understand and appreciate the function of having a paywall like that. I definitely see the benefit.
Yeah, it's a good word. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Another question was, what are some of the tangible benefits that one gets from being a member of Church of Satan?
I mean, I can speak to my just own experience, right? When I joined the Church of Satan, could I have networked with some individuals? Yeah, the internet was around. Of course, I can get in touch with certain people, but it's also a way of saying, okay, for sure we have this basic understanding, and I've so much so that I've committed myself to a certain extent financially and through resources and time to joining this organization. So that shows a level of commitment, right? Of understanding, at least, right? Is it a guarantee? No, there's plenty of people who join the Church of Satan who are completely idiotic. And I'm sorry, it's true. Sure. There are some people who just who have, who received a stimulus check and they're like, oh, okay, well, I'll just join the Church of Satan. Sure. And a lot of times these people end up being a pain in one way or another. And actually the Church of Satan actually rejects a lot of members. It's, they get a lot of crazy notes along with the membership, and it's like, hey, you know what? You're going to be a headache. So you take your money. No, thank you. But what do I get out of it? I can only speak to my experience. I've been able to work with various members, various projects. Some of it has been out there, is out in the open. Some of it isn't. But at the end of the day, I never went into it trying to get something out of it. And I think that's, if you're going to, again, if that's the approach you're going to have going into it, you're going to be disappointed. That's not what we want out of individuals. It's not, we're not looking for people who want to get a kind of community out of it. And yeah, there's asking what tangible things, something, at least in my experience, I was working with some members of the Church of Satan already prior to me joining. I was holding parties, events, musical concerts in New York City, and I happened to be working with members of the Church of Satan. And I always kind of felt like I was piggybacking off of some of the, publications that they were running. They had advertisements for some of the shows or music that I was working on and working with other individuals. So I wanted to put it out there. It's like, you know what? I acknowledge what you're doing. I acknowledge the work that your members are doing. I acknowledge that there is this history of this philosophy that's benefited me aesthetically. It's benefited me philosophically. It's probably driven me in many ways. So I'm just paying it back to the organization. So that's how I saw it when I joined. And it did open up various doors and avenues for me. So I think if you're interested in the Church of Satan and you're looking into what can you get out of it, you're going to get the satisfaction that you've contributed to an organization that represents your philosophy. If you want something more out of that, we have the active member application. Put that up. That's not an additional. It could be. I don't remember if there's additional cost to it or not. If there is, it's negligible. But you can apply for active membership, and then see where that goes. See what doors that opens for you. What things. I would try to go into it with a certain intent, maybe in terms of, I want to work on music. I want to work on art. I want to work on, I want to see what some other members are doing in certain fields of interest that you have. And if that's the approach you go about it, I think you can come out of it with some positive experiences. But at the end of the day, it comes down to you as an individual and what are your goals going into joining anything.
I've got just one last question here. What are some of the overall goals of the organization? Since it's so based in individuality, what is the point of the collective?
Yeah, well, so we don't have a collective, and we don't really have, just our goal is to, I can say this. Our goal is to reach out and influence productive individuals and show them our philosophy. And if that aligns with them, that's great. That's what we're trying to do is put out, we're like a lighthouse. We're beaming out our philosophy. And I think certain people will come be attracted to it. And we're going to stratify those who are attracted to our philosophy. And I think over time, we've reached people who are productive in various fields and influential in various fields. And we think that can help, put a influence of Satanism in the greater world. Now, do we have a specific program? We kind of do, actually. We have the Pentagonal Revisionism 5-point program. And so these aren't strict things that every member has to do, but these are things that members may be interested in achieving. And we actually we encourage these things. The first thing is stratification. We encourage members to apply the philosophy of stratification in the world, and in whatever work that they do, apply that. We encourage the strict taxation of all churches. So we don't get involved in politics per se, because there are many different ways that individuals can apply Satanism to their personal politics. But we do think that churches are businesses, and they should be taxed like businesses. Now there's different, some people would say, well, that's a specific political program. It can be. Sure as hell pisses off a lot of libertarians when we bring up that point. But it could, but I also know members who are part of the Libertarian Party who understand it's like, hey, if we're going to tax anything, we should tax churches. Ideally, we shouldn't tax anything, but it is what it is. I've heard that kind of go about. So that, to me, that just shows that this point can be applied in many different political angles. So we leave that up to the individual to determine. No tolerance for religious beliefs, secularized and incorporated into law and order issues. So when LaVey wrote this was specifically to the point of lex talionis, which is holding people responsible for their crimes. And because there was at the time a wave of criminals who would be saying, the devil made me do it. They explain away their beliefs, saying how it's possessed. And it's like, no, that's a religious belief. And it's, we need to punish people for the crimes that they commit. Now, there's other ways of applying that philosophy in different ways, because nowadays we're seeing religious beliefs secularized and incorporated into law. And I think that's a thing that we would encourage members to engage in, right? But now here's the thing. I understand, because I know TST people kind of focus in on this point and they say, aha, that is what we're trying to do. That's the whole point of the Satanic Temple. And we would say, well, to what effect, right? To what success are you really having in that? And is that causing more harm than good? Are there existing organizations doing this already? Or is there a better way to do it? And are you changing and manipulating the idea of Satanism in order to achieve that? So again, I think that's best left to individuals to determine how they want to engage in that point. And it could go, and it could come from different angles. And there's not one specific political angle in which you could take that. The development and production of artificial human companions, slavery. That's what it is. I mean, I'm gonna come down to it. It's it's a tricky subject, but I think that there is a human desire towards domination, and it's obviously unfavorable, human domination right now in our times, and for good reasons. But I think there is an industry that we can take advantage of with that to develop artificial human companions in order to healthily exercise that part of our nature. And also that goes in line with the idea of total environments, which is establishing your own environment at home to your own liking. There's various ways that can be applied based on your own aesthetics.
I have to say, I did not think our conversation would veer into artificial human companions, but it's very interesting for sure. Is there anything else you might want to touch on that we haven't covered yet?
No, I think we touched upon everything itself. I think the important thing was, especially when it comes down to these quotes from various interviews and things in the past, put it into context of the time, put it into context of the individuals, especially if you're talking about, a lot of your 2 episodes were based on Zena and Nicholas. So like I said, Zena completely disassociated, unfathered her father in 1989. Yeah. She actually put a death curse on him, and she completely rejects his philosophy. And so does Nicholas Schreck. So did Nicholas Schreck. And even Nicholas Schreck says, you know what, I completely disagreed him from the get-go. And I was trying to expose him, and I was trying to push the Church of Satan in a different way. So given that context, watch those interviews again. Read Anton LaVey's actual printed material. Read his interviews. Are you going to like him? Probably not. You probably hate him still. You probably dislike Satanism just the same, but at least dislike it for the accurate reasons, right? There are definitely plenty of things that I'm sure plenty of people will find distasteful with Satanism, and that's fine. Sure. I'm not trying to convince anyone. I'm not trying to whitewash it. I'm not trying to make LaVey this goody guy that, he's just like that crazy uncle that you've gone along with. No, he was a deeply misanthropic person with a very harsh, realistic view of humanity, and had high expectations for those who he influenced and who would take up the mantle of Satanism.
Yeah, well, I certainly credit him. You can't take anything away from Anton LaVey in regards to his place as the father of modern Satanism. Organizations like the Satanic Temple and any others that may come exist as an evolution from the starting place of LaVey. Lucien Greaves has been open about the fact that he was a member or aligned with Church of Satan, and he was my introduction to Satanism as well. It was just what I needed as an outsider teenager. His words hit the spot for me at the time. Over the years, I've drifted away from that, and I don't feel as aligned with much of it like I once did, but I still find some value in bits of it. I assume my audience here is mostly Satanic Temple leaning people, but I still wanted to make sure that I had someone representing this other perspective here to correct things or fill in some of the blanks. So I appreciate you taking the time to come do that. Thank you very much, Raul.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Take it easy. All right, guys. That was my chat with Reverend Raul Antony. Before I end the episode, I thought I might just give my thoughts on what was shared over these 2 episodes. First, I have to give credit to my guest. He was very knowledgeable and prepared. And despite my own opinions on some of the topics, I appreciated his delivery of the information. And I appreciated that he didn't necessarily try to sugarcoat some of the realities of his philosophy. In a couple of specific areas, his view was a little softer than I expected, but in some cases, he was right on the money. There was one thing that stood out to me a bit. I perceive a bit of hypocrisy, maybe, in the way they deal with a lot of the terminology. You may have noticed that I focused quite a bit on the definition and interpretation of several specific words throughout our conversation. Some of them were Satanism, sin, magic, Satan, or the devil. As I noted in the first part, so many of my interactions with Church of Satan people is just them crying about how Church of Satan invented Satanism, so only they get to define that word, and that definition can never be expanded or changed in any way. But when I pointed out the other terms, like sin and Satan, he was totally fine with those well-established words being redefined to suit their desired meanings or use. So that makes it harder to take the whole gatekeeping of Satanism thing seriously, because you realize they aren't principled at all about it. It's just this very flexible, self-serving thing. And then the last thing was when Raul said, "We don't have a collective." There's this strong focus on individualism in Church of Satan and a distaste for the idea of community, which we talked about. So the model for executing that is extremely simple. You put your philosophy out there and call it a day. You already have the Satanic Bible and several other books. You can always publish more books or blog posts to expand on your philosophy. But when you have a page that says, "Join our club," join the Church of Satan, and people who do all get to carry around a membership card that identifies them as a member of that club, I hate to break it to you, but that's a collective. And when hundreds or thousands of followers, yes, followers, collect in social media groups or on Reddit, that's a clear desire for satanic community. And the only way around that is to, again, redefine the term or try to explain it away somehow. I don't understand why they don't just own it, but perhaps it's just not for me to understand. Thank you all for listening. Please stop by HailSatanPodcast.com and hit all the buttons. Stay safe out there. Hail Satan.
I'm going to ship it in at the evil free service.